Breaking news overnight. Special Counsel Jack Smith's report on President-elect Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election was released. Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas has the details. Good morning, Pierre.
George, good morning. Special Counsel Jack Smith, in a new report, is calling out President-elect Trump and bluntly stating he brought the case because he believed he would have gotten a conviction.
This morning, the special counsel who investigated Donald Trump's role on January 6th and efforts to interfere in the 2020 election has issued a blistering report, sharply criticizing the president-elect's attacks on his investigation.
Okay, so here's what everyone in Washington is pretending not to see right now. Jack Smith, the special counsel who was prosecuting Trump, just dropped a report that basically says the same thing over and over again. He had enough evidence to convict Trump and send him to prison. Like actually send him to prison. And that's not me being dramatic here. That's Jack Smith, the federal prosecutor, writing it down in an official government document for the entire world to read. This isn't some opinion piece or some talking head rambling on cable news. This is the government's case laid out in black and white, saying that Trump should have been convicted. But here's the thing that's absolutely wild, and this is what nobody wants to admit out loud. Trump is out here claiming total exoneration. He's saying the whole thing was a witch hunt, a complete hoax, total vindication. And meanwhile, the government's own special counsel is literally telling Congress that the only reason Trump isn't facing real prison time right now is because he won the election. Come on, that's not vindication. That's the opposite of vindication. That's a we almost got you moment, frozen in time, and everyone in D.C. knows it.
Trump, who has maintained his innocence throughout, mocking Jack Smith this morning, calling him a lame-brained prosecutor who was unable to get his case tried before the election. He stated, "The voters have spoken," George.
Pierre, a lot of details in that report on the violence that was perpetrated on January 6th.
Indeed, it was. Jack Smith believes that Trump was directly involved in inciting that violence, although Trump has maintained that he wanted the actions of the people out there to be peaceful.
Think about that for a second, because this is actually kind of insane. The top federal prosecutor investigating Trump spent months building a case. He interviewed witnesses. He gathered evidence. He studied the documents. He analyzed communications. He built a legal framework. And then in January of 2025, he releases his final report and tells everyone, and I mean everyone, Congress, the media, the public, that based on the evidence he collected, a jury would have convicted Trump on multiple counts related to January 6th in his attempt to overturn the 2020 election. That's not a small thing. That's not some partisan attack. That's not some random prosecutor saying something controversial. That's a trained federal prosecutor saying, look, we had the goods. We could have put this guy away. We had the evidence. We had the legal framework. We had everything we needed to take him to trial and win, but we can't because he's president. That's absolutely insane when you really think about it. So why isn't Trump in prison right now? Well, here's where it gets interesting. And this is the part that's eating Washington alive. Presidential immunity. That's the whole answer. That immunity question that's been haunting this case since day one. See, the Justice Department has this policy, and it's been the policy for decades, going back to the 1970s, that you cannot indict a sitting president. You just can't. Even if he breaks the law, even if you have overwhelming evidence, even if you've got proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The theory behind it is that a sitting president needs to focus on running the country, not defending himself in criminal court. The government needs to function. The executive branch needs to operate. So, when Trump won the 2024 election and took office in January of 2025, Jack Smith had to shut down his prosecution. Not because the evidence wasn't there, not because Trump didn't do what he's accused of doing, but because the guy sitting in the Oval Office can't be prosecuted while he's sitting there. That's the rule. That's the policy. And it's saving Trump's life right now. This is the absolutely insane reality that Democrats and cable news commentators have been losing their minds over for the past few weeks. They're saying things like, voters saved Trump from prison. And you know what? They're kind of right. If Trump had lost in 2024, we'd probably be in the middle of a massive criminal trial right now. If the election had gone the other way, we'd be watching jury selection happen on CNN. We'd be seeing prosecutors present evidence about January 6th. We'd be seeing Trump's lawyers defend him. We'd probably be watching closing arguments by now. But it didn't happen that way. Trump won, and now he's immune. Now he's protected. Now he's untouchable. And everyone in Washington understands the implications of that. But here's what's freaking everyone out in DC. And this is the real story that nobody wants to say out loud because it sounds crazy. Jack Smith's report didn't just say Trump might be guilty. It said Smith had proof beyond a reasonable doubt of a criminal conspiracy. It said Trump's actions were unprecedented. It said that without Trump, January 6th doesn't happen. And all of that is sitting out there now in a public document. Basically, waiting. Waiting for what? Well, that's the question everyone's asking behind closed doors. Waiting for Trump to leave office. Waiting for a state prosecutor to pick it up. Waiting for the next Congress to do something with it. Who knows? But it's all sitting there. This is why people are calling it a prison alert or a prison roadmap. And this is important to understand. It's not because there's an actual alert saying Trump's going to prison tomorrow. There's not. There's no arrest order. There's no judge saying he's going to jail next week. But it is an alert in a different kind of way. It's a warning. It's a flashing red light saying that Trump is publicly claiming total exoneration, while the government's own special counsel says in writing that he had enough evidence to convict him and send him to prison. But he was blocked only by timing and immunity. That's the tension that's eating Washington alive right now. That tension between legal limbo and what Smith calls powerful evidence of guilt, that's what's got everyone on edge. And that's what gives you a strong narrative for understanding politics in 2026. There's this virtual prison alert blaring in the background of American politics right now. Even without an actual arrest order today, even without Trump actually being in custody, the threat is real. The evidence is real. The legal framework is real. But the immunity is also real, and that's the contradiction nobody knows how to solve. All right, so let's talk about what Jack Smith's report actually says, because there's a lot of noise out there, and people are getting confused about what the evidence really shows and what it means. A lot of folks think this report means Trump's definitely guilty, like he's been convicted already. Other folks think it means Trump's definitely innocent because the charges got dropped and the investigation ended. But both of those interpretations are kind of missing the point entirely. What Smith's report actually shows is something different. It shows a legal and constitutional problem. The evidence exists, the crime allegedly happened. The investigation found what it was looking for. But the sitting president is constitutionally protected from prosecution because of a Justice Department policy that's been in place since the 1970s. So, you've got this weird situation where Trump is claiming vindication, but if you actually read what Smith wrote, he's basically saying the exact opposite of that. In January of 2025, Jack Smith released his final election interference report. And in that report, he made some pretty stunning conclusions that didn't get nearly enough attention in the mainstream media. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but only slightly, that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. That's legal language for, yeah, we could have won this case in front of a jury. That's not me interpreting it. That's not some legal expert speculating. That's the prosecutor saying we had a winning case. And he didn't just say that about one charge either. He said that about multiple federal crimes, multiple counts, all tied to Trump's attempt to overturn the results of the 2020 election. This is serious stuff. This is the kind of thing that gets people sent to prison. This is the kind of evidence that prosecutors dream about having when they're building a case against a sitting president. Smith used some pretty strong language in that report too. And this is important to understand. He said Trump engaged in an unprecedented criminal effort to overturn the legitimate results of the election. Unprecedented. Think about that word for a second. That's not a word that prosecutors throw around lightly. That's not casual language. That's saying that what Trump did was genuinely shocking, genuinely unusual, something that had never really happened at that scale before in American history. An unprecedented criminal effort. That means it was bigger than anything we've seen before. It was more coordinated than anything we've seen before. It was more brazen than anything we've seen before. And Jack Smith thought it was serious enough to write that in an official government report. Then Smith explained why the prosecution ended. Was it because he ran out of evidence? No. Was it because he couldn't prove his case? No. Was it because the evidence wasn't strong enough? Absolutely not. The investigation ended because Trump won the 2024 election and came back to the presidency. And according to the Justice Department's long-standing policy, a policy that goes back decades, you cannot indict a sitting president. Period. End of story. No exceptions. So Jack Smith had to pack up all of his evidence, write his report explaining what he would have done if Trump weren't president, and basically hand over the whole thing to the public record. This is where it gets wild, because now every single piece of evidence that Smith gathered is sitting out there. All of the witness testimony, all of the documents, all of the communications, all of the analysis showing that Trump coordinated with his lawyers and his advisors to pressure states into flipping their election results. It's all public now, or at least most of it is. Some of it is still being released in various congressional proceedings and in court documents. But the core evidence, the fundamental case against Trump, that's all out there now, where any prosecutor could potentially use it. That's why people are calling it a prison roadmap, because Smith didn't just conclude that Trump probably did crimes. He laid out in meticulous detail what those crimes were and what evidence supports that conclusion. He showed his work. He documented everything. He explained the legal framework. And now that's all sitting in the public record available for anyone to use in a future prosecution. Smith actually testified before Congress about all of this stuff, and he was pretty direct when he did it. He didn't hedge. He didn't use careful legal language that could be interpreted different ways. He told the House Judiciary Committee that January 6th doesn't happen without Trump. He said that Trump's team had evidence proving beyond a reasonable doubt that there was a criminal scheme to block the transfer of power beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the standard that prosecutors have to meet to get a conviction. That's the bar. That's what you need to send someone to prison. And Jack Smith said they could have cleared it. They could have met that standard. They could have gotten a conviction. Now you got members of Congress literally saying out loud that voters, not the courts, saved Trump from prison. Think about that statement for a second. That's a wild thing to say about a sitting president. That's the kind of thing that would sound crazy if you said it 5 years ago. But that's where we are in January of 2026. Because if Trump had lost in November of 2024, there's a pretty strong case that he would be sitting in a federal courtroom right now. He'd be facing a jury. He'd be seeing prosecutors present evidence about how Trump tried to overturn the election. He'd be watching his lawyers defend him. He'd probably be seeing a conviction happen in front of his eyes. But he won, so none of that is happening. Instead, he's president and he has immunity, and the whole thing is frozen in legal limbo. But here's where most people get confused about this whole situation, and I want to clear this up right now. A lot of folks think the Jack Smith report means Trump's definitely guilty. Like, case closed. He did it. No question about it. Other folks think it means Trump's definitely innocent because the charges got dropped and the investigation shut down. But both of those interpretations are kind of missing the actual point. What Smith's report actually shows is that there's a legal and constitutional problem that doesn't have a clean answer. The evidence exists. The crime allegedly happened, but the sitting president is constitutionally protected from prosecution because of a Justice Department policy that's been in place since the 1970s. That policy says you can't prosecute a sitting president. So, Trump can't be touched right now. But that doesn't mean he's innocent. It doesn't mean the evidence isn't there. It doesn't mean Smith didn't have a case. It just means the timing is bad for the prosecution. So, you've got this crazy situation where the Trump administration is saying the report proves Trump's innocent. They're saying it's a complete exoneration. They're holding press conferences about it. They're tweeting about it. But if you actually read what Jack Smith wrote, he's basically saying the exact opposite. He's saying, look, if this guy wasn't president right now, if he lost the election like Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, we would absolutely take him to trial. We would present this evidence to a jury, and we would have a really good shot at winning. We had the goods, we had the framework, we had everything we needed. That's not vindication. That's a get-out-of-jail-free card based on timing and technicality. That's not Trump being found innocent. That's Trump being protected by immunity. And that's what's driving everyone absolutely crazy in Washington right now, because everyone knows that this situation is temporary. Everyone knows that Trump is not going to be president forever. Someday in 2029 or 2033 or whenever he's going to leave office. And when he does, that report is still going to be sitting there. It's not going anywhere. It's not getting deleted. It's not getting sealed. Any prosecutor, federal or state, could potentially use it as a foundation to bring charges again. Okay, let's break this down into what actually matters, because there's a lot of noise here, and I want to give you the real story that cuts through all the nonsense. The evidence is overwhelming, and that's the whole problem. This isn't about whether the evidence exists. It exists. Jack Smith doesn't write a report saying he has proof beyond a reasonable doubt if he doesn't actually have it. That's not how federal prosecutors work. These are careful, methodical people who deal with legal standards every single day. They're trained in evidence law. They understand burden of proof. They understand what a jury is going to respond to. And Jack Smith said straight up in his official report that he had enough evidence to convict Trump on multiple felony counts related to January 6th and the attempt to overturn the election. The evidence apparently shows that Trump worked with his lawyers and his advisors to devise a scheme to flip election results in specific states. It shows that Trump pushed state officials to change their certified results. It shows that Trump knew the claims were false, but pushed them anyway. It shows that Trump's actions directly contributed to January 6th happening. That's a lot. That's serious criminal conduct that in literally any other context would result in a prosecution, a trial, and probably prison time. Someone else does this, and they're sitting in a federal penitentiary right now. Someone else coordinates with lawyers to overturn an election, and they're looking at decades in prison, but Trump did it, and he's president, so he's protected.